and welcome to Gateways to Healing. I'm Scott McGuffey, clinical hypnotherapist and your host. Gateways to Healing is a program in which we look at how you can utilize complementary medicine with Western medical services. In this series of programs, we introduce, explore, and explain the 4 gateways to healing: mind, body, spirit, and community. Today we're going to look at the community. And to help me discuss community, I have a community of friends from Integrated Healing Arts here in Palo Alto. On my right is Paul Sibsey. He is a holistic counselor, teacher of meditation and process acupressure. Paul is also co-founder of Pathways to Self-Healing, a spiritual community for self-realization. And also we have Dr. Marianne Ferda. She is a chiropractor and yoga instructor with a strong appreciation and understanding for our communal relationship with our planet and its other inhabitants. Also joining us is Dr. Larry Freeman. He is a family physician and a licensed acupuncturist. Larry has a strong awareness in regards to the Western medical community and the holistic healing community. And also with us is Dr. Nick Zerpolo.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Nick. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Nick is a psychologist who is a strong observer and guide in community dynamics. And last but not least, back with us again is Christine Roche. She is a health educator, nutritional consultant, and a national certified biofeedback and hypnotherapist. Chris holds clarity and awareness with single individuals and the economic variances that affect community involvement. So we should have fun here today. We have a good community, and let's just jump right in. My first question is, how can community be a gateway to healing, a healing opportunity, and even a healing force? Paul, why don't you start us off?
Well, as the years go by, Scott, the more I really can see that perhaps community is just one of the most essential aspects of good health. When Mother Teresa first came to this country many years ago, the first thing she really observed was, in India, we have physical starvation. We're hungry. But over here, you folks have a spiritual starvation that really comes from our tendency to be isolated from one another and not connected in community. As generally you'll find in India and other Asian countries that people really are connected in a deep way. I was just dealing with a woman today who, a young lady, and I'd been working with her for a while, and she came in after going away to a meditation retreat. She came back and she just looked really good and just felt really solid. And I thought, well, this meditation must be really good for her. You know, I wanted to credit meditation since I teach that. And as it turns out, she said, well, this may sound crazy to you. She said, but it was actually the time that I spent with this community of people where I was actually seen and heard in a way that I never was as a child. She said, it just felt like I was being held in a way that I had never been held. And it was so healing for me. And I said, gee, you know, I think I can understand that.
That sounds like healing force. What are some of the healing opportunities? I'll just open this up to the guests here. What are some of the healing opportunities that community provides that, say, maybe some of the other modalities like in mind, body, and spirit that they don't provide for? Marianne?
Well, it's that same sense of connectedness with other individuals. We use the term sentient beings because it's not only other humans, but other animals, the rest of the planet. So feeling a connection to ourselves and then to one another.
And how does that lead to a healing process? Larry or Nick, Chris, want to jump in?
Well, we're always in relationship with other people. It's difficult to imagine a life lived all by oneself. And in a way, it's like fish not noticing water. We often don't notice that we're part of community, and that community is what holds us and sustains us all the time, just as family does. And we also have the larger community.
So it's almost like a life force then. The community has a life of its own, and we are a part of that? Is that
Absolutely.
Great. And I wanted to bring this question up first for Larry. Why is it that our involvement in community has not been recognized as a fundamental process for healing and well-being, for health and well-being?
Yeah, it's really an interesting question, and when you look at medical school curriculum, social health is not even on there, not recognized at all. And even in the holistic health movement, in the complementary health movement, we talk about mind, body, and spirit, but community, social health is something that until recently hadn't even been recognized there. And I think a large part of that stems from the fact that people who are involved in the healing community oftentimes are very introverted people themselves. And so they don't, it may be a blind spot for those who are in the position to develop curriculum and to develop clinics and to develop healing centers. So I think it's very important that we recognize that. And I certainly recognize in my own practice that people, when they were coming in, much of what we talked about and much of what were the source of their stress and disease was based upon the relationships that they had with their family, relationships that they had at work, all of those types of things. And when we started to deal with those and get people to develop more healthy relationships and to see a better and more healthy perspective on relationship and community, that oftentimes it was a real healing experience for them. I've referred them to classes at IHA, and when they get involved in them, I don't see those people anymore, except when I go to those classes, because it keeps them well.
We have a couple co-founders of Integrated Healing Arts here. What was the purpose behind that in forming a community of healing practitioners? Was that part of the awareness the community was viable?
It was. Well, I think one of the things that really cemented the organization together was the notion that as a healing center, our relationships needed to be exemplary of the type of relationships that you want people to have and experience where they work, and as a result, we meet in 2 retreats a year, and 90% of the time, the things that we deal with are interpersonal relationships and strengthening those and making them more healthy.
And Marianne, you wanted to say something?
Oh, back to what you had said, what you had asked previously. I think part of the reason that it hasn't been seen, community hasn't been seen as an important aspect of healing, is that there haven't been any, objectifiable measures of the impact of community on healing. The impact of interaction. I mean, I mentioned with other beings. Nick and I were talking the other day about a study that was done with seniors, and seniors living alone versus seniors with partners versus seniors with pets. And this was one of the first things the studies that I was aware of that demonstrated that just having a dog, having a cat, having another live being, there's comedic things about one's relationship with plants and little old ladies hugging trees and such, but you have a relationship with your physical surroundings, whether it's plants or animals as well as humans. It makes a difference in your life, which we're beginning to now be able to measure.
And I was just thinking, go ahead.
I think, too, it has been recognized in some places. One of my teachers, for example, wrote a book called Family Mediation of Stress, which showed very clearly that when a person was a member of a family, whatever the stresses were that happened to that one individual, they were attenuated and softened in terms of their real impact on the person by whether or not the person was in a viable family structure. So that we kind of know that instinctively. It seems like, sure, that's something Grandma always knew, isn't it? But we somehow miss it because we haven't singled it out. And that particular teacher taught in medical school, but in the preventive medicine, community medicine department, and he wasn't quite heard very well in the clinical departments. So that's very true.
And it sounds like what we're talking about here that's real key is the relationship that you have to other people, other sentient beings, to the earth itself. Well, let's look at the process itself. It seems like here we are living in Palo Alto, the Silicon Valley. There's plenty of people here. Why is it so difficult to engage in the process? And when we bring Chris into the conversation here, what are some of the problems that you see with single individuals not engaging within the process of community?
Part of it is, the lifestyle here in Silicon Valley is that we have such a busy overworked community that, for example, a client I spoke with today, was saying to me he works, average of 12 to 15-hour days and is really very lonely and isolated, and yet feeling like, the pressures from the workplace and the economic lifestyle make it essential to put that first. And so there is, a real separation there, whereas in the past we were oftentimes living and working in very homogeneous communities, for long periods of time. People would grow up near there and, know people and develop relationships. One of the things I find often with colleagues and clients is especially single people find the mobility, just people moving to the East Coast or Midwest or, constantly moving is a major factor as well. So it's time, pressure, economic uncertainty, and then not knowing how to really connect with other people as well.
That's a good point. Do you feel that people of the generations, the younger generations now, I mean, they're coming right out of high school into college, or maybe even not that, going right into the corporate world? I mean, the engineers and the internet people. Do you think that they're lacking something within community process, within community healing process?
I think they tend to congregate with people that they spend time with. That's typical. And in schools, people have a lot of free time. So they get into each other's personal lives more. But now when people go into the workforce, especially in the corporate workforce, they tend to hang out with other people in the corporation, and it isn't until they leave that corporation that they find that the friends don't go with them, the friendships don't transfer, because they don't have the shared context anymore, and then everybody's surprised.
It's a good point. Laurie, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I think that some of the more enlightened companies are realizing that this is something that they have to address. I know that there was a feature article in the Mercury News a couple of weeks ago about Yahoo and how they recognize that these people are working long hours, that the time that they spend at work is the majority of all of their time, and that they need to develop ways for them to feel as a community and feel as a family in order to continue to have the energy and the creativity to be a successful enterprise. And so I think more and more of the companies in Silicon Valley need to, wake up to this fact that people need to have a feeling of belonging and won't last very long and be very productive or creative if they feel isolated.
So what are some of the groups here in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, that find themselves being isolated from the healing community experience? We've mentioned singles a little bit. Is there another particular group that kind of stands out?
I think generally men.
Men?
Men tend not to congregate with other people, especially other men, unless it's in the context of some shared activity, and that tends to be pretty traditional. It might be work, it might be sports participation, or sports being a spectator. I don't mean to be overly stereotyped, but I see this a lot. And men don't seem to socialize very readily because that involves interpersonal feeling, and that's not what the male handbook gives us, is what about feelings.
And what about senior citizens? I know we've been hearing a lot of news about, as the baby boomers advance in age, that there's a lot of separation happening with that.
For years I was a teacher in senior nutrition programs and worked a lot with the convalescent hospitals. And of course that's a major problem. And there are, however, some interventions in place, such as senior nutrition programs and programs that come into the convalescent hospitals. All of those are very helpful. The problem is not for the people that go there, but the people that tend to isolate. And that's the same thing that happens in our general society. The people who tend to have community and are used to community seek community. The people who feel isolated and separated tend to stay that way. And it's very difficult to get them to do that. And that's one of the things we do at IHA and in Pathways to Self-Healing, the meditation community, and many of the classes. We try to include people. And it's one of the greater healings to watch people go from that fear and terror of dealing with other people. It's frightening, and to slowly begin to be received in a healthy way and to be seen and watch them melt and open and begin to find that's very valuable.
Yeah, you are also a co-founder of Pathways to Healing. If we can, let's go ahead and bring up some information for the audience out there on Pathways to Self-Healing. And Paul, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the development of that community and how that all got started, just briefly, and What's the benefit to that particular community there?
Well, it actually had grown out of integrated healing arts because I'd been teaching that with Jim Charlton, meditation, for a number of years. But when we joined integrated healing arts, when we came together, it began to unfold and flower because many of the practitioners at IHA find that they want people to have more of this community feeling, and that's one of the ways they could get them to participate. And then, of course, we all have an understanding that meditation and yoga and things of that nature are very helpful. And so as people began to come, we also opened up a Sunday service. So it's a time for people to come to a Sunday gathering that doesn't emphasize dogma, but simply invites people to come together in community to connect with themselves and with each other and with the divine in whatever way they like to. We find that to be a very healthy thing. In fact, much of the research that's going on now finds that when people do belong to a spiritual community particularly, that they get healthier. They seem to live healthier lives. And so this is one of the things that we really wanted to do that's important for both IHA and Pathways to Self-Healing.
Great. And what are some of the other community groups that can bring in people if one of our viewers is looking and watching the program and they're saying, well, I just don't know where to go, because I do that all the time. It's like, well, what am I going to do tonight,
I'd like to pick up on something that Chris was saying earlier about the lack of regular families and multi-generational families as normal groups that have been throughout human history. We don't have a lot of it because of this geographical and economic mobility. It is possible for people to join families, and families to me usually means people of different age groups doing things together. So it's possible to get involved with daycare centers. They always need volunteers. It's possible to get involved with senior centers. They always need volunteers. And those are groupings of people who are already together where there's a natural recognition for seniors that elders are important in the community. When they don't have families to be in a context of, there's no particular structure that recognizes them and their importance and their wisdom and their experience. Children are important. They're just full of vitality and full of newness and all that, and they're not predictable, and we keep learning from our kids. So one can spend time with them doing that. Schools love volunteers. We have retired executives programs in our towns. People with all kinds of skills to bring. Homemaking skills, business skills, plenty of places to go.
And Marianne, you also have a connection with a community that is...
The Bay Area Action is multidimensional.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to pause for a moment. If we can go ahead and just bring up that information while you talk, that way the folks can write it down as you talk about it. Go ahead, Marianne.
Okay. So Bay Area Action is, multidimensional. Some of the projects that they're involved with is stewardship of the Arastradero Open Space Preserve. So they're responsible for trail maintenance, for planting California native plants. So if someone's interested in being outdoors, the Arastradero Open Space Preserve, even if just to go for a hike there or ride a bike, is an excellent avenue. Another one of the involvements that Bay Area Action has brought to an art is called the Environmental Eating Action Team, which is one of my favorite involvements. It's a group of individuals that are that get together on Thursday nights and share a dinner. So it's just eating with other folks, and the chef who's involved, it's her dedication to demonstrate to people how to eat healthfully and deliciously low on the food chain. So here again, we bring in other sentient beings. So it's possible to eat healthy, nutritious, delicious food and not eat other animals. There are school groups which give information and education about how to take care of the environment and how to eat healthfully. There are creek cleanup projects, typically in the springtime after the floods and the heavy rains, to clean up the creeks. So those are just a few of the things that Bay Area Action has been involved in for, I think 20 some odd years.
Great.
I think one of the things, if you love the outdoors and you love nature or you love cushion, then those are opportunities for you to find community in those activities.
Exactly.
And I think I think what people need to examine is find the thing that they have a passion for, and then find a community of people to do it with. And to realize that eating well, getting exercise, being emotionally healthy, those are building blocks to health. But being within a community and feeling connected is just as important.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of support there. I mean, I just see this wonderful circle where there's just support and ecology and everything just happening all at once.
That's one of the things that I think is so key to Bay Area Action. Nick was talking about men sometimes feeling disconnected and being, if I can, we have all of these electrical engineers and computer types that are very driven and very goal oriented. So you could go and help clean up a creek and just sort of incidentally be doing that with other individuals that had the same kinds of priorities. Or you go to learn how to eat good vegetarian food with other people who have the same interests, and maybe you have other interests in common. So it's a source for generating that kind of connectedness.
And the other thing I'm kind of picking up on here is that it sounds like when we talk about being involved with community, it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like you're promoting play almost. Is this true?
No, we really want to be very serious about this.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really true, and it is one of the big problems that I think, as Nick said, men have, but people in general, we promote individualism in this country, and so there's a sense that I shouldn't need anybody. I shouldn't need counseling. I shouldn't need to hang out with those people. I can do it by myself, and that tends to be to support isolationism. And certainly, we can't expect those type of people to come into a support group. They're just not going to do it. But as was pointed out here, they will do something like get involved in something that they're interested in, and they sort of go around the corner to get that very thing that's very healing and helpful. And if you mention to them, by the way, it's very healthy for you, no, I don't want anything to do with it. So don't mention that at all.
Well, it's too late now.
That's right.
Another really obvious thing that just occurs to me: community theater.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
So
Dance programs.
Dance
musical
classes.
programs.
Right.
And for all ages, too.
Exactly.
I think, and oftentimes, maybe I think it was Larry, we were talking about how families, you had shared with me an experience where you said that you didn't know who your neighbors were until you had your daughter. Right. And that was kind of like, now you were into a community, whether you liked it or not. Mm-hmm. And seemed to have some positive aspects for everyone involved at that point,
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, what about the economic variances that happen with that? We've been talking a lot about volunteering and that there are places like that. So that's not really a good excuse anymore. Is that right?
No, it's not, definitely. And I wanted to add, too, that there is an organization, based on what we were just talking about, called Friends for Youth, and it's in Redwood City. And they, have especially people who have either, their children no longer at home or so, in whatever way, spend about 3 to 6 hours a week with a child anywhere from age 7 to 17, and just get to know the family and that child and contribute in that way. So that's another really good way to connect up with that. And I think that, with so many opportunities, it's important to really look at values and priorities so that each person needs to really ask themselves, what are the things that are most meaningful to me, the highest values that I have, and how can I connect up with that? And then we need to have more people that can, join some of these different areas and then participate, So then the next step is to say, well, I really know that I value, like Larry was saying, I value good food, or I value activity, and therefore I'm going to join the Sierra Club, or I'm going to be in environment action, groups. And so just to make that commitment does require a few hours every week or whatever time, and that's where I see that that's always the challenge. Do I spend more hours at work, or do I go and, do that, or spend time with the other things? That's probably the most difficult one. And then looking at what's the highest priority.
And what's the greatest success, as far as benefit to working within a community? We talked a little bit about relationships and isolation. What are the healing benefits? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Well, it's on every level. That it's fulfillment. Physically, you get to interact with other people and put your effort in with others, like cleaning out a creek or something like that. Emotionally, you make relationships. Intellectually, maybe you solve problems together, something like that. And spiritually, or more as a social being, you help find your way to purpose in life. What is meaning? We have this big problem in modern life of meaning versus meaninglessness. Meaning isn't just handed to us by the Catholic Church or something, some major organization anymore. We each have to figure it out. So finding purpose through being with other people, it's natural. You find that purpose is there if you do some things and discover it in front of you.
And I think that all the momentum, all the energy in our society, in the local Silicon Valley here, is to become more and more anonymous. And so when you go to a grocery store, you don't know the clerk, they don't know you, no one does. And so even when you go to the doctor nowadays, the doctor sort of doesn't even know you. Okay. One holistic physician, Bernie Siegel, talked about a patient because he advised that people, when they go to a doctor, make sure that the doctor knows that they're who they are, and that they're not just another number and another patient that they have to. And so this one patient took him up on it and wore one of those fake noses with the glasses and everything, and wore it halfway through the examination before the doctor even realized that she was wearing it. Another patient, cornered their doctor and gave their doctor a big hug. I mean, you have to get out there and make sure that people realize that you exist and that you're an individual. And so get to know, the clerk at the grocery store. Get to know people in your community, because that's something that makes you feel like you're a person.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
And when you feel that sense of connecting, it takes away the sense of isolation. It takes away the loneliness, and that has a real physical benefit, because when I feel alone in the world and I've got to do everything myself and I'm all isolated, I get bunched up, my stress rises, I get higher blood pressure, I'm not relaxed, I'm ready to fight or flight. That's not very healthy. And so yes, it has a general relaxing of the being and a very healthy, beneficial effect on the physical body as well as everything else.
And a lot of feedback too. I mean, you get to bounce things off back and forth and open it up to the community.
It's good for the doctor and for the grocery clerk too.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, who's isolated, the patient or the doctor? It's a two-way street there.
That's an interesting thing you mentioned about the grocery clerk. In the 70s, I joined Co-op Markets, and so I've been a member of Co-op. And I know the clerks, they've been there 25 years just as I have. We know each other's name, and I hadn't thought about it, but yes, they are part of my community, I'm part of theirs. And that really feels very homey and familiar and comfortable.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to thank our community of guests here from Integrated Healing Arts, Paul Sibsey, Dr. Marianne Ferda, and Dr. Larry Freeman, Dr. Nick Serpolo, and Christine Roche. And if you can just take some time and make some time, actually, and just get out in the community and realize that it's really beneficial to your health and to your healing and your well-being on all levels, as we've mentioned here today. So until then, I'm Scott McGuffey, Gateways to Healing. Here's to your health.